Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Show. The full football card is back. Well, kind of. The weather's wreaked havoc with loads of the scheduled games called off, but the games that have survived the pure Baltic conditions have provided more than enough festive entertainment so far. Late drama at Pittodrie this week, twice. We're going to have a look under the bonnet of the Don's season so far. And what a World Cup he'd had already before producing his finest work in the final. Ali McCoist, we salute you. Hello, yes, I'm football filmmaker Findlay Marks, sitting in the hot seat this week, and joining me on the show, I'm delighted to say, is the co-host of the Scottish Football Forums podcast and author of Scotland's Swedish Adventure, John Bleasdale. Hello, John.
Hello, Finn. Nice to meet you in person. I've not been on a podcast with you before, so thank you for the invite.
It's lovely to get this front three starting for the first time together. Let's see how it goes. And completing that front three alongside John, making his debut on the pod, is a commentator heard both on the BBC and Red TV, co-host of the Hampden Roar podcast, Andy Bargh. Hello, Andy.
Hello, Finn. Such a late call-up. I don't even think I have a squad number.
We'll try and find you one maybe in the lost property or something like that. Guys, I guess there's only really one place to start this week. Lionel Messi inspired Argentina to their first World Cup triumph in 36 years, defeating France on penalties in a pulsating final. But surely it was all down to the inspiration he received from Jason Cummings at the end of the Australia match, no?
I've actually seen, I think Messi's already got that Joker tattoo now in his hand. I saw him getting that done.
And I mean, now that Messi's finally gone and done it at a World Cup, he's won everything imaginable in the game, is now finally the right time for him to come to Scotland and to prove to the world and himself that he can actually do it on a Baltic and Dreich night away in Falkirk.
Yeah, definitely. He could rock up at Pittodrie and just defer his wages, just come. He doesn't need the money, just come for a couple of grand a week and help Aberdeen win the first Scottish Cup in 33 years it'll be this year, and he can have his dream of the Scottish Cup glory.
Can you just imagine that, right? Messi in the Premiership or one of the lower divisions. Just try and compute how much of a mockery he would make.
So what if Messi was going to sign for a Scottish club, where do you see him kind of settling? I'm just trying to think, Messi's the GOAT, so where's the closest that he could get to a GOAT, either in terms of a club logo or anything in Scotland?
Well, goats make similar noises to a sheep, so Aberdeen is the natural fit.
Well, there you go. I think that's it settled. He's on his way to Pittodrie. You heard it here first, folks. Just talking about the World Cup final. It's got to be one of the best things ever. Ali McCoist's line. Did you guys hear this in ITV's coverage of the World Cup final?
It's Kylian Mbappe. It's in, and the story continues. You just can't put them down. First person ever to score a hat-trick in the World Cup final, where all three have been over the line. You're going to get some letters from that. I'll make it one or two.
Ali McCoist, we salute you. Absolutely fantastic patter. Slightly closer to home, did anybody see the jobby pie at Raith Rovers?
The first thing that spoke me was that looks like a tin of dog food. It was rank or cat food. It looked absolutely disgusting. No, I think that's one they can throw in the bin.
I wonder if that's what they are all like, or if that's an anomaly from the packet. Are they all that bad at Raith Rovers? Because honestly, looking at it, it's from the picture, it looks cold.
Yeah.
How you can tell that from a still image, but it looks freezing.
For anybody that hasn't seen it, it looks fairly congealed is the word I would say. It didn't look like there was a lot of fresh meat in there. But like you say, it could be an anomaly. I'm sure the pies at Raith Rovers are usually delicious. What is the best pie or food that you guys have had at Grinding Scottish Football?
Kelly do a good one, don't they? I used to have a lot at Kelly, doing the commentary there for Kelly TV over a few years. And what was quite good is, or the whole press room would really get them either at half-time or full-time, mostly half-time, but they were wee mini ones. So you could get them down you pretty quickly, especially if you had to scurry back over to the gantry. So they were good, the wee mini Kelly pies. I really like them.
I like the steak and chorizo at McDermott Park. They were absolutely amazing. That was the only highlight of a St Johnstone 0-St Mirren 0 game last year.
To be fair, that sounds absolutely cracking. You were talking about the food that gets provided to you as a commentator, Andy. Like, is there quite a spectrum of the type of food that you get? Are there certain clubs that really look after you? Are there certain ones where, you know, they kind of give you the rubbish biscuits without any chocolate on it?
Off the top of my head, Rangers food isn't good. St Mirren's, I was at St Mirren Park earlier this season. That was quite biscuit orientated, if I remember correctly. But they had wrappers on them, so they must have been okay. Motherwell, I think they've trimmed it back now, but maybe into last season. Maybe it might have been before COVID. I can't remember. But Motherwell used to have a really good spread. They had like pakora, chicken wings and stuff like that for the press at Fir Park. I'm sure Grant and Laura and also be able to testify that was really good. Cans of juice, iron brew, whatnot. Bit biased because I would have Kelly pies often working for Kelly TV, but when I've gone to Motherwell to do stuff, especially pre-COVID times, Motherwell had the best spread.
That sounds great. Press pakora, absolutely outstanding.
Tillman, the Dean have to be so careful with him. Tillman somehow got his cross in. Arfield! He's only gone and done it again! Absolutely amazing from Arfield! And Rangers have pinched the points with 2 goals in stoppage time!
Now, while teams from the Championship all the way down the football pyramid in the country have valiantly held the fort during the enforced mid-season break, serving up some terrific action across the divisions and in the cups, this past week saw the Premiership return to bring back a full fixture card across the SPFL for the first time in over a month. Well, that was until the weather had different ideas. Just 7 matches survived across last weekend, and we'll have a look at those matches in a few moments. But I feel like there's only really one place we can start a roundup this week, guys, and that's at Pittodrie, the scene of 2 extraordinary matches over the last couple of days, both for quite different reasons. Let's have a look at the most recent of those 2 games first. The second match in a row where Rangers have come from behind to win a match 3-2. This is about as close as you can get to a smashing grab job, is it not, John? I mean, how did Aberdeen lose this match?
How long have we got? We've not got much time in the podcast. How to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I know Rangers have a bigger and better squad than Aberdeen, more resources, etc. But I don't care who you're up against. When you're going into time added on, injury time, and you're 2-1 up, you should not be losing that game. But it was almost coming. I mean, Aberdeen did well for 65, 70 minutes, pressed Rangers. I think Goodwin made a couple of mistakes with his substitutions. He didn't need to make 3 at the one time. He didn't need to take off Duke and Majowski, because then we lost an out ball. And the ones he did bring on, Marley Watkins, who looked immobile, and Shaden Morris, who jury's still very much out on. We kept putting the ball at the park, losing it. Even though Rangers weren't playing particularly well, there was a couple of Goldson passes that went out for throw-ins at times, for example. You still had the feeling that they had something in them. And then, Kelleris, dreadful error for the equaliser. He spills it. He should be doing better. Jaden Richardson should be reacting as well. But then at 2-2, you think, right, okay, we'll just have to take the point. It's disappointing. But then to lose, and the goal that we lose is ridiculous. We don't stop the cross. Jaden Richardson, I don't know what he's thinking with his header, heading it back into the danger area. Kelleris just looks as though he's flapping like a budgie. He's all over the place. Just panic set in, and I'm still not over it, Finn, as you can tell.
Jim Goodwin had said after the game it was, Scott Arfield was the only player that was following it in, that there should have been other players. It was a shame because Roos had quite a good game up to that point, and and it ended up costing a goal, and then, ultimately, I guess 2 goals maybe from that mental drop that comes in. Was there maybe an argument as well that Alan McGregor could have done better from Duke's free kick as well?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's one Alan McGregor even a year ago could and should have been saving, but it's a terrific strike from Duke in the first place, to get it up and down the way he did. But McGregor's been caught up a couple of times this season where he's taken a step one side and then the ball's going in the other, and it's not always been in the corner. That one was last night, obviously, but I think McGregor a couple of years ago would have definitely saved that, but take nothing away from a great strike from who I consider to be Aberdeen's best signing this season.
Talking of great strikes as well, can we just talk about Clarkson's goal as well? Does that boy score anything other than brilliant goals? Just an absolutely fabulous finish to put Aberdeen in front.
He seems to have this. I don't know, maybe if this is a bit of a stretch, but he seems to have that sort of young, casual assurance that I think maybe Madison had when he came up to Aberdeen. Not suggesting that Clarkson will go on and become, part of an England World Cup squad or anything, but the way that he goes through games, I've been impressed by. And what's that, 4 league goals plus the one against Annan in the Cup, and they've all been brilliant in different ways, haven't they? So the volley last night, the free kick against St Johnstone, screamer against St Mirren or Livy, was it? I can't remember which one.
It was, yeah.
And then the back heel against Hibs. 4 really different types of goals, but all absolutely superb. He's a really talented player.
Yeah, he's building up his own goal this season. You can tell he's got that little bit of extra bit of talent that other players in the team just don't possess. And there's times he can drift in and out of games, like Maddison did when he first came up, and he was a bit raw. But you can definitely see his quality, and we missed him when he went off last night. And the way he took his goal was absolutely sublime. It's just a shame that obviously it counted for nothing in the end.
There's no doubt about it. He's like such a real talent, but it was a bit of a journeyman that was actually the match winner in the end. Scott Arfield doing it again. He scored some really important goals for Rangers off the bench in recent months. I think there was the equaliser away to Livy on the opening day, and of course the equaliser in the Scottish Cup semi-final against Celtic in May as well. Does he kind of seem endemic, though, of Rangers' reliance on what is looking increasingly an ageing squad and one that's in desperate need of a refresh in January? It kind of just feels maybe that they're, just limping to the reopening of the transfer window, where they surely need to get some new blood into the squad.
Well, I'm not of the opinion that a player should automatically fall further down the pecking order just because they are ageing. I think if they're contributing to the team, especially in the way that Scott Arfield has for Rangers over the past, 3-4 seasons now, however long he's been there, he's clearly integral and has been under a series of managers now, and he started life well under Michael Beale. He has a knack of being in the right place at the right time that is absolutely not coincidental. I think he is reading of the game, and his anticipation of where to be and when the ball is going to arrive is absolutely superb. I'm not sure Rangers have another centre mid that can do that at the moment, and I know that Arfield's played out on the right side a couple of times, especially under Van Bronckhorst, but I think that if you look at, say, Jack, even Tillman in an attacking sense, Glenn Kamara, none of them are going to do what Ryan Jack does. So unless Tom Lawrence can come back fit and firing and maybe assume that role, I'm not sure Rangers have another player that can contribute what Arfield does right now.
No side in the Premiership have claimed more points from losing positions than Rangers this season. Does that highlight their persistence and character, or is it actually more a marker of the fragility that they go behind in matches so often?
I think it's definitely a bit of both. They do have defensive issues. They've been playing James Sands, who's a centre midfielder and centre back most of the season. Yeah. Lundstrom had a game in centre back recently, but it does show the mentality they have, that they keep going and are able to dig out results. So as much as it's interesting that's that, because a lot of people are saying this Rangers team isn't great. They've also got manager sacked, etc. But they must still have some form of character about them that they've managed to retrieve points in the way they have.
That's a really interesting point, Findlay, because if that is a marker of Rangers' determination and confidence once they've gone behind, it completely flies in the face of what Connor Goldson said last night after the game, that they wouldn't have won that game earlier in the season. So how do those two things go together? Because if they've done it more than anyone else, then surely they would have always stood a good chance of turning that round against Aberdeen last night. To be honest, I think that's Connor Goldson just talking in cliches to try and get the fans back on side, etc. Look at us, new team, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I think that if Rangers are coming back from losing positions, it's impressive, but they shouldn't have to be doing that, should they? So I think it's more important that they address why they're going behind. Fair point, John, about the amount of injuries they've had, because if you look at, I think Sands and Leon King have played a fair number of games for Rangers this season. Pretty sure Van Bronckhorst and now Michael Beale would absolutely not choose that if they could avoid it. So when Goldson's back fit now, who knows when Suter will be available again, who knows when Hollander will be available again. So defensive issues certainly.
Of course, a few days prior to this game, the other half of the Old Firm visited Pittodrie, where league leaders Celtic continued their incredible streak of late winners this season, with Callum McGregor's goal in the 87th minute being the marginal difference between the sides in scoreline at least, but in truth that was about the only metric by which Aberdeen were close to Celtic at all on that day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the amount of passes Aberdeen, accurate passes Aberdeen had 117. Cal McGregor, I think, was 173. I think that tells you the story. It was eye-bleeding material. I'm not going to lie when I say this. It was when I was watching the second half, I actually had to do some chores around the house to stop myself from falling asleep because it was awful to watch. People can argue we're 7 minutes away from becoming a masterclass almost in tacticians because we'd have got the point we would have saw it, but that's not the way to do it. I mean, I'm not saying Aberdeen need to be playing all-out attacking football. Absolutely not. You try that against Celtic, you'll get absolutely ripped apart. We've had many rippings off Celtic the last few years, but fans are paying like £28 on average to go to Pittodrie, and to see them basically not even try to have a go at Celtic. St Mirren proved that you can be defensively organised and have an attacking intent at the same time, and they came away with the victory. It was really tough to watch, and there was no question Celtic deserved to win.
Is the truth somewhere in the middle, though, John, about fans paying their money and they want to see more attacking intent from their team? I think deep down, what fans want is their team to pick up positive results. The managers are paid to make the tough decisions. You're absolutely spot on that St Mirren showed earlier in the season and that Celtic can be overturned if you approach it in the right way. On this occasion, it seems that Jim Goodwin hasn't done that. But let's not escape the fact that if he had ended the game with a point for Aberdeen, then I don't think anyone is talking about the style of football that his team played. Yes, it didn't come off in the end, but if they had a go, for example, and I think he's perfectly right to point out at Ibrox, we tried to take Rangers on and they ripped us apart. Yes, that was at Ibrox last night, or the other night was at Pittodrie. I don't think there's a right and wrong way to win a game of football. I think you have to do what's absolutely necessary in your eye as a coach or a manager to set your team up to try and quell the opposition.
Well, the stats from that game, like you were saying, John, are quite incredible. Aberdeen had 19% possession to Celtic's 81. Aberdeen had 117 accurate passes. Celtic had 754. The shots on goal, Aberdeen had 2, Celtic had 33. Interestingly, it's the same amount of shots on target that Aberdeen had against Rangers as well and scored 2 of them. So slightly more clinical in that one. But just as you were alluding as well to comments, Andy, that Jim Goodwin made after the Celtic game, he'd said, we tried to have a go at Celtic on the opening day of the season and lost 2-0. We tried to have a go at Rangers at Ibrox and lost 4-1. Today we tried to come up with a different game plan to frustrate Celtic and hit them on the counter-attack. Is this just kind of the way of it for teams like Aberdeen going into these games where it's like a stick or twist? Do you try and have a go? Or is it something where you need to, first and foremost, be defensively really rigid and difficult to break down, and then if you get the chance, try and play on the counter and nick it?
Yes, I think it's being rigid, keeping your shape and restricting the amount of space that Celtic, especially their wide players, have to work in. So I'm by no means a UEFA accredited coach or tactician here, but when you look at teams that have managed to stifle Celtic and even Rangers, I know Postecoglou doesn't like them being grouped together, but let's face it, it's relevant.
Yeah.
If you look at teams that have managed to stifle Rangers and Celtic over the last few seasons, nobody has done it more than Livingston and Kilmarnock. And Livingston do it because they're solid, they force the ball wide and they trust their defenders to deal with it when it comes into the box.
Yeah.
Killie did it mostly under Steve Clarke because they had a superb shape and the relationship and communication between the defence and midfield was brilliant, and they had a bit of a threat on the counter. To be honest, Eamon Brophy was in form, Jordan Jones was at the club for the majority of that time. Yeah. It all stems from being firm in defence. So Jim Goodwin has asked his players to follow that instruction. The players have got to back themselves to do it. Look at the winning goal Rangers scored last night is the polar opposite of that.
Yeah.
So that comes down to the players, not Jim Goodwin last night. Jim Goodwin cannot control those two defenders with puppet strings and make them head the ball clear. Was it Stewart and Richardson that came together?
Yeah.
How one of them hasn't dealt with that, I'll never know. That comes down to those two defenders taking responsibility for their own actions at that moment in time. Same with the goalkeeper for the previous one. That's not Jim Goodwin can't do anything about those individual mistakes. And against Celtic, Cal McGregor was given a bit too much room in the edge of the box. He's pinged one superbly into the corner. So, yes, the decision to play so defensively against Celtic is backfired because Aberdeen had no threat going forward. The counter was completely nullified if they even got over the halfway line, pretty much. Last night, they had something going forward, scored 2 great goals, and then at the very end of the game, that's, in my opinion, that has nothing to do with Jim Goodwin. That is about players coping with pressure and taking responsibility for their actions when it matters. When you compare, John, Aberdeen of last season to this season, okay, Aberdeen were not great last season. If you compare, I've got the league tables up, right? So if you compare Aberdeen this season to last, right now, after 17 games, they're on 25 points. Last season, after 17 games, they were on 21. So slight improvement, really. It's much of a muchness, if anything. The league position is improved 3 compared to 6, but they're conceding more goals this season. And you look at last season's partnership, Bates and Gallagher were getting slaughtered at times. And I know that there's been changes on the right-hand side as well. How relevant is Calvin Ramsey to the difference in the goal concession count? Ross McCrory played centre-back for a number of times last season as well, didn't he? So I don't know what it is you would imagine anyway, that Aberdeen would, given their league position, would be more solid this season, but it's not the case. They're conceding more goals than they had at this point last time.
Yeah, it's really annoying from our point of view because Liam Scales has come in and done well, although he can't play against Celtic. On the whole, he's been a good signing. So you could see he's an upgrade on what we had initially, but can you say that Anthony Stewart's an upgrade on David Bates and Declan Gallagher, who both get Scotland caps to name? I wouldn't say so. I certainly don't think Jayden Richardson is anywhere near the quality of Calvin Ramsey. But we've left ourselves embarrassingly short of centre-back options. We only have 2 natural centre-backs because Ross McCrory is a midfielder. Yes, he's been playing centre-back recently, but he's a midfielder. That's by far and away his best position. I mean, the recruitment's been a lot better than it was under Glass. I mean, there's no the only signing under Glass's tenure that's still there is Marlon Watkins. You know, that just says everything about the recruitment last year. And even that Watkins, as we mentioned before, he's no more than a squad player.
This is something that I was wanting to ask you, John, specifically about in terms of the signings that have been made this year, because as Andy was mentioning, last season there were a couple of different issues throughout the team. One in particular was scoring goals. You know, there were quite a few good players on paper at Aberdeen, but they never seemed to find the back of the net. But this season, you know, you've got Miovski, you've got Duke, who's become a fan favourite very quickly, and the likes of, you know, Clarkson chipping in with a few goals every now and again. How would you compare, on balance, the squad this season to last season, given the interesting stat that Andy was raising, that they're not actually that much further ahead in terms of points on the board than last season? Yeah,
although you could argue we're also in a League Cup semi-final, whereas we went out in the first round available last year to lower division opposition. So it balances itself out in that regard. We're a little further ahead than last year. I mean, certainly from an attacking point of view, you know, we're scoring more goals, especially at home. Duke and Miovski have been very good signings, and Clarkson's been a good loan signing. I think Kilson at left back's been fairly solid. I've liked Scales, as I say. But we're still a wee bit lopsided because we're short on centre-backs, as I say. Right-back situation needs addressed. I mean, it says a lot that Matt Kennedy is preferred as a right-back to Richardson recently. I think that says it all. Christian Ramirez is still at the club at the moment. He was one of the few players that did well under Glass last season. And people ask, why is he not being used as an option? Well, Ramirez didn't help his own case when, after the Scottish Cup game we lost to Motherwell, when Glass was sacked, Ramirez down tools for the rest of that season, and some of his social media behaviour was pretty strange. I think a partner of the ways is going to have to come eventually. He's out of contract at the end of the season. He's mainly still with us because he couldn't get a club back home in America, but maybe we'll see that in January. If not, it'll happen at the end of the season.
I think at least with the conundrum there is they've replaced those goals with Miovski and Duke. One big thing, and I think maybe Clarkson has filled the void slightly in terms of goals, but let's not forget Lewis Ferguson left Aberdeen in the summer. Huge player. And that is a whole lot of goals taken out of that team. Granted, a whole bunch of penalties, but he was a dynamo in midfield for Aberdeen, and him and Ramirez not playing anymore is a big void to fill, because their goal contribution last season, especially in the league, I think it was 21 between them in the league alone last season. That's a lot to replace. So Duke and Miovski are doing a pretty good job of that.
Just looking at things as a whole, John, how do you kind of like rate Jim Goodwin's performance this season so far? It seems to be that they've got things pretty well sorted when they're playing at home, They've played at home 9 times, won 6 of them, lost 3, and 2 of those that were, fairly exceptional games in the last week. It seems to be on the road that Aberdeen have struggled to pick up points. In terms of away form in the league, they'd be 8th in the table, taking just 7 points from their 8 matches on the road so far this season. But overall, how would you rate Jim Goodwin's performance since the start of the season?
Well, it's interesting because Jim Goodwin was my choice when Dep McInnes was leaving, and he remained my choice when Stephen Glass left. So I must say it's not been the progression I thought it would. Like last season when he came in, I thought he would have at least arrested this alarming decline in the team, but he wasn't able to do so. We got over the line in terms of not getting dragged out of the relegation playoff. This season, there's no doubt in my mind we are seeing progress. Because we are sitting third, and yes, you can argue that there's not much a miss. There's a much between the rest of the teams in the league. Because 1 minute you can be third, the next minute you can be 6th.
Yeah.
At home, we're a more formidable team, apart from when we play Celtic and Rangers, of course, in that odds game against Motherwell. But away from home, there's no question there's issues, and defensively we need to sort that out, especially on the roads. We're conceding far too many goals. I think Goodwin's still trying to find out his best team, if you want my honest opinion about that. And I think once he gets that, we might get somewhere. Third in the cup semi-final, it's not bad. But as Aberdeen fans, we're hard to please at the best of times.
Celtic, meanwhile, continued their formidable form at home, defeating Livingston 2-1 at Parkhead last night, extending their lead at the top of the table once again to 9 points. But let's just briefly look at the other Premiership games from last weekend. Hearts climbed to 4th in the Premiership courtesy of a 3-1 victory over Kilmarnock at Tynecastle. Josh Ginnelly opened the scoring before a Lawrence Shanklin double sealed the victory for Robbie Nielsen's side. Those goals mean Shanklin moves on to 11 league goals for the season. That brings him level with Rangers' Antonio Cholak and Aberdeen's Bojan Miovski at the top of the goal-scoring charts. Is there a discussion to be had about him being called back up to the national side again at some point? His last cap was a fleeting substitute appearance in a Nations League defeat to Slovakia in late 2020. But I mean, he's played 25 games in all competitions for Hearts this season, scored 14 goals and 2 assists. I mean, surely that's the kind of form that should be propelling him into that kind of conversation, no?
Now we're talking. He absolutely has to be in the conversation. Findlay, no doubt about it. I quite like Kevin Nisbet. I was never sure if he was going to make the most of his place in the Scotland squad. So I think if we're using that metric, Shankland absolutely has to be considered. I think at the moment we're looking for a third place striker. We have Adams and Dykes, who are the front two really. Young Tommy Conway in the Championship, I think he might break into the squad this season, on fire for Bristol City. I think that place is well up for grabs, and if Shankland is not involved in Steve Clarke's thoughts, I think it would be very unfortunate. Nisbet, I think, is quite far away from that. Ross Stewart's just come back from injury for Sunderland, so Shankland's been hitting the right notes at the right time. As long as Adams and Dykes are fit and firing down south, and well, let's face it, even if they're not, they'll probably still be in the squad because of how Steve Clarke operates. I think that third place striker jersey could well be Shankland's if he keeps this up. Yeah, I've no qualms with him being involved. He kept his nerve to stick a penalty away against Israel in the semi-final as well. Let's not forget that. Yeah. He was actually pretty good in Moscow when he came off the bench before they tore his limb from limb in the second half. I think the first 15 minutes of the second half, Shankland showed some good touches, hold up play, and then they just battered us. So, I think that the third place could be Shankland's if he keeps this up, and I've got no complaints. I
was actually quite shocked that he wasn't in the last squad for the Turkey game, because he was scoring goals before that. I don't think Clarke experimented enough in that squad, but that's just another issue. But no, at the end of the day, Scotland aren't exactly blessed with many great strikers right now, so anyone who's in form has to be considered.
There was an amazing stat that came out of this game. This is Hearts' first win over Killie at Tynecastle since December 2016. They'd drawn 1 and lost 6 in the other games before that. I just find that astonishing. The only other game in the top flight to survive the weather last weekend saw St Johnstone defeat Ross County 2-1 to move to, at the time, within a point of third place in the Premiership. Ali Crawford scored a double in the space of 2 minutes as the Saints came from behind to secure a victory. St Johnstone are now unbeaten in 6 Premiership matches, picking up 4 wins and 2 draws, with all 4 wins being by a single goal. They were finding form at the right time just before the break, but this kind of suggests they're going to pick up where they left off, Andy.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot to be said for St Johnstone and Callum Davidson this season. I'm really happy to see them start to rebound from what they went through last year. I think that a lot of the critics were ignoring context of how much the squad and Callum Davidson's core had been completely taken out of that team, and he had to rebuild, and it took a while for them to get going, and eventually they get over the line against Cally Thistle in the playoff. This season he's managed to put together a decent team, and after a wee ropey start there, they've put a few results together. I think that's 4 wins in their last 6, isn't it? So yeah, really happy to see that. And the momentum swing was so immediate in Dingwall the other day. I was actually working on that game, and they weren't brilliant, County, to be honest. They got their lead, nice header from Jordan White, but St Johnstone, I felt, were the better team, and Ali Crawford off the bench scored another important winner away from home. He managed it a couple of times last season. He's a player that kind of floats in and out of importance for clubs, doesn't he, Ali Crawford? I don't think he's the most reliable, but he can pop up when you need him, and a couple of good finishes. The first one was a really quick reaction, and the second one as well, he had to adjust his body quite quickly to divert it on target. So yeah, really impressive from St Johnstone. They were the better team, deserved the win.
It certainly shows they knew that they were doing in terms of sticking by Callum Davidson, because there was a lot of people that were calling for Davidson because of the sudden downturn in their form that propelled them into that position where they were in the playoff. And obviously he had enough credit in the bank from the double cup win the year before. And even getting into this season, a lot of people thought St Johnstone was struggling. They didn't start particularly well, but he's stuck to his beliefs, and I think bringing in Nicky Clark has been a terrific signing. You know, the other big question was, could they replace Sander Clark? Well, Matthews in goal has been sensational for them, I think. I think he's been very good. So, no, good luck to St Johnstone doing very well. And who knows? I mean, we're talking about Hearts and Aberdeen for third place. St Johnstone, in the form they're in, could sneak that.
Quickly rounding up the other matches that survived the weather last weekend. In the Championship, Partick Thistle defeated league leaders Ayr United 3-2 at Firhill, meaning there are now just 5 points separating the Honest Men at the top of the table and the Jags in 5th place. What a league that is. Raith Rovers and Arbroath finished 1-1 in the only other match to go ahead in the division. And in League One, FC Edinburgh were held at home to a 2-2 draw by Montrose, neither side able to get the 3 points that would have put some pressure on Dunfermline at the top of the table. And 2 late goals from Nathan Austin and Callum Higginbotham gave Kelty Hearts all 3 points away to Queen of the South, who have just this evening announced that they're parting company with manager Willie Gibson. Just looking ahead to this weekend's fixtures as well, Rangers travel to Ross County on Friday night. The other match that night is Motherwell versus Killie. On Saturday, St Johnstone have got the unenviable task of going to Parkhead to try and thwart the Celtic juggernaut. St Mirren are hosting Aberdeen. Hearts travel to Tannadice to take on Dundee United. And Hibs play Livy. Just looking through the other divisions as well, there's some cracking games on in the Championship. Top of the table clash between Ayr United and Dundee at Somerset Park, and a battle of the Thistles as Partick host Inverness Cally at Firhill. I mean, it remains to be seen how many of these games will survive the weather this weekend, but here's hoping that there'll be a good few that survive it. That's all from us this week. A huge thank you to John and Andy for joining me on the show, and of course to all of you out there for listening. From all of us here in the Scottish Football Show, may we wish you a very Merry Christmas, and we'll see you again at some point before Hogmanay. Until then, take care.